Hi, this is Dana Stanley, VP of Marketing at Survey Analytics. Thanks for accessing our archived webinar, How to Conduct Extended Intercept Surveys, a Reebok case study. This is a slightly edited version compared to the original, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start you off right after I introduced our speaker in the live session. And that speaker is Mike Mercier, who is the president of Insightful Alliance, a Cincinnati-based research company that worked with Survey Analytics to do a very innovative methodology using a combination of mobile research methods. So here you go. Here's Mike, and enjoy the webinar.
We developed this, what we call the extended intercept method, for an intercept survey that we did for Reebok. And what I'd like to do in this presentation is, first, I want to provide you with an overview of the extended intercept method, and that'll include some background on how we developed the method, the components of the method. I'll explain which of Survey Analytics research applications we use to execute the survey, and how we set those applications up, and then I'll get into how they worked in the implementation. And I'll also tell you briefly about the costs and benefits of using this method that we realized in the Reebok case. I'll give you a quick overview of the preparation process required if you want to do an extended intercept survey, and then I'll also run through a checklist of best practices. Just to give you some basic background on the project, Reebok had hired us to do an intercept survey at a running expo, and this was going to be taking place for 2 days, and it was just prior to a road race in Atlanta. It's called the Peachtree 10K Road Race, and I believe it's one of the, sorry about that, it's one of the largest road races, 10K road races in the world. And the idea would be that we were going to be in the Reebok Expo booth, and we would conduct intercept surveys with Expo attendees as they entered or walked past the booth. Our initial plan was to do a standard mobile intercept. So the idea was going to be that, just like with a traditional intercept survey, people would be walking into the booth and or walking past the booth. We would approach them. We'd ask them if they were willing to complete a brief survey. If they agreed, we'd execute the survey. And our initial plan was to do this using iPads that we would have loaded with Survey Analytics Survey Pocket, which is it's a mobile survey application. And with this screen, I just want to show you a little bit, just briefly, how that would work. So the central core of Survey Analytics suite of research applications is a data management platform, and they call it Survey Analytics. So Survey Analytics, it's the central application where you enter, store, manage, and analyze questionnaires, panel information, data you've collected in surveys. So among other things, Survey Analytics, it allows you to program a single survey questionnaire and then make it accessible to respondents through a variety of channels. And one of those channels is Survey Pocket. So Survey Pocket, it's a mobile survey application that can be used on smartphones, tablets, and iPads, and it's stored locally on the device. So the way it works is you would say download Survey Pocket from iTunes or the Android Play Store, and then you'd enter your questionnaire into the Survey Analytics platform, and it would be pushed out to Survey Pocket, to your iPad. And you'd conduct your surveys, and then your completed surveys would be pushed back to Survey Analytics. So, and then later on, when you have a wireless application, the surveys are stored locally, but later on, when you get a wireless application, that's when you sync up Survey Pocket with Survey Analytics, and you push the completed surveys back. So, as I said before, this was our initial plan. It was for this Reebok project, it was simply to conduct intercept surveys. I apologize for this. I don't know what's going on here. The initial plan was simply to conduct intercept surveys using this method, that is, using the iPads loaded with Survey Pocket. But as we began to proceed in this project, and as we began to work with the Survey Analytics platform, we were exposed to some of its additional functionality, and that included the ability to set up a single survey and to make it accessible simultaneously through multiple channels. So through other channels in addition to what we were using, which was Survey Pocket. So in addition to Survey Pocket, we found we could also provide access through both a smartphone and an online laptop. So the way we would do this is we could provide access to the laptop because Survey Analytics would generate a URL for that survey. At the same time, Survey Analytics would also generate a QR code for that survey. So we basically realized that if we could find a way to give the URL and the QR code to people, that this would allow us to get people to complete the survey who otherwise wouldn't have been able to complete it. And there were basically three groups we realized we could reach in this way. Number one was those who were too busy. So these would be people who, were in the booth. We approached them, asked them if they're willing to take a survey. They say, I'd love to, but I'm just too busy right now. If we could have a way to give them the URL and the QR code, we could allow them to complete the survey, anytime over the next 2 days at their convenience. The second group was those who might have passed us while we were interviewing someone else. And everyone knows that's the biggest frustration in doing intercepts. You cringe because you've got 30 people walking past you while you're conducting an interview. So again, we realized if we could somehow make the QR code available in the booth and visible, then we thought maybe we can get people who, if we're busy interviewing someone else, people might see the QR code, scan it, and do the survey themselves on their phone. And then the third group was those people who went to the booth, but whose path we just wouldn't cross. So Reebok had a decent-sized booth, and they had some walls and a physical structure that you could actually enter, like with changing rooms and storage space. So we knew there'd be people on the other side of that booth that we would never see, So we realized we could reach those people too. So that's, our initial plan, as I said, was just to use Survey Pocket. So we decided, what the heck, let's give it a shot. Let's see if we can, figure out a way to get the QR code and the URL to people and see if we can extend our reach on this survey. And what you see on the screen is the tools that we ultimately ended up using in the field. Down here on the bottom right, I'm showing Survey Pocket on the iPad. So that's how we did the Intercept interviews. Above it, we developed a 3-inch by 5-inch index card where we placed, you see here, the QR code, and then we also have a URL. So it says here, if you can't read this, complete a short survey on running for a chance to win one of 5 $200 Reebok gift cards. To complete the survey, simply scan the QR code or visit www.runners.surveyanalytics.com. Survey closes July 4th. And you can see we were able to customize the URL so it was intuitive, easy to remember, and was relevant to the subject of the survey. So the idea with the cards was, as I said, we would hand the cards to people who said, I'm too busy to do the survey right now. But we also realized once we got in the booth, we could place the cards, stacks of cards at different spots throughout the booth, hoping that people might just pick them up that we don't even encounter. So we had them on some counter space that was in the booth. We also had a table that I would describe as being our center focal point for the survey, where we stood around the table. We left our iPads on the table when we weren't using them, and we had the cards stacked on the table. And then the third thing we did was Reebok was actually selling merchandise in the booth. They had merchandise on display, and they were selling it, and there were cash registers with cashiers. And they agreed to slip a card into everybody's bag when they purchased something. The third field tool you see on the left here was a table poster that we developed. And it says, complete a short survey on running for a chance to win one of 5 $200 Reebok gift cards. And excuse me, we had this on a stand on the table where we were standing to execute the surveys. And again, the idea was we hoped that people might stop and chat with us and say, yeah, I'll do it on my phone. Or if we were interviewing somebody else, if they were walking past the booth, they might see this poster, stop, scan it with their phone, and either take it right then themselves on the phone, or maybe save the page on the phone and take it at a later time. So, I just established that our ultimate goal with this extended intercept method was to extend our reach beyond the people that we were successfully able to interview in the booth. And if given that that was the goal, the ultimate question is, were we able to do that? Were we able to extend our reach to these other people? And did they ultimately complete surveys? And the numbers that we generated, I think, speak for themselves. We found that in the end, 40% of the completed surveys were derived from the poster and the index cards. And that represents a 67% marginal response rate. So we actually, if we had not used the cards and the poster, our numbers would have been, a third or more lower than they were. As we all know, the ultimate question is not just what's the benefit, but what did it cost you to realize that benefit? And I obviously can't share proprietary or confidential information about our costs, but what I've done here is created what I think are some realistic scenarios just to illustrate for you what it cost us. So what I have in this left-hand column is two hypothetical project budgets for Intercept surveys. So a budget of $15,000 and $20,000. And the next three columns are hypothetical scenarios for the total cost of designing, printing, and shipping different numbers of and sizes of posters and cards. So, one scenario is $300, another scenario is $500, and the third scenario is $1,000. The percentages you see are given the project budget, say in this example, the project budget of $15,000, if you spent an additional $500 to print the cards and the posters, that's only a 3% increase in your initial budget of $15,000. So for a 3% increase in your project budget, you could have realized a 67% increase in completed surveys. So, you can see the range here. It goes from, in the scenarios I presented, 1.5% to a max of 7%. And those numbers obviously would be different. It would vary depending on how many people you had in the field, how many days you're doing the survey, et cetera. But I think that this is designed to give you a sense for how relatively inexpensive it could be if you're already doing Intercept surveys using the iPad to just go one step further and print the cards and the posters. So I've shown you the components of the extended Intercept survey and a bit about how we executed it on site. What I'd like to do now is just provide you with an overview of the preparation process. And I think doing this it'll help you put into perspective basically the steps that you need to take between the time you finalize your questionnaire and the time you actually are on site executing the survey. And I know everybody listening to this is a professional researcher, so I'm not going to. My intent is not to teach you something about how to plan a survey, but it's just to show you how easy it is to integrate these very simple steps into the normal process. So the first step here is to program your questionnaire. And this is an example of the interface within Survey Analytics that you'd use. It's very clean and simple to use to program your questionnaire once you've developed it. Then the next step would be to generate the URL and the QR code. And what I'm showing you here is the interface within Survey Analytics where you would do both of those things. At the top, you see it says Survey Link, and here you see a URL that you can copy and paste. And as I mentioned before, the URL is customizable, so you could change it so it's intuitive and relevant to your survey. At the bottom, you see this QR code, and this is a unique QR code that has been generated by Survey Analytics for this specific survey. And right below the QR code, you see it says download. If you can't read that, it says download QR code. So it's just a very simple, you're basically downloading to your hard drive this image, saving it, and then emailing it to your graphic designer to have the posters and cards designed. Okay, and then step 3, once you've grabbed your URL and QR code, you initiate the process of designing, printing, and shipping your cards and posters. The thing to keep in mind there, obviously, is I found that working with third-party graphic designers and printers, they have varying schedules, and there can be some time lag. So you just got to make sure you do that early enough in the process to make sure you hit your deadlines. Step 4 here is configure Survey Pocket on the iPad and the Android, or if you're using an Android tablet, on your tablets. And this simply involves, as I mentioned before, you're visiting iTunes or the Android market, you're downloading the Survey Pocket app to your iPad or tablet, and then you're going to get a device key that you enter into Survey Pocket once you open it up on the iPad. And the device key is unique to each survey, and this is basically the mechanism that allows Survey Pocket in the field to communicate with the Survey Analytics platform. So it's basically the key to receive the questionnaire from Survey Analytics and then to send back the completed surveys. And then the final step is to test your survey on all 3 platforms. So test it on the iPad or tablet, test it on the smartphone, and test it on the laptop. And the intent there is pretty obvious. It's to make sure that you can experience what the interviewees will experience, and make sure that there are no glitches, there are no problems with the presentation, with the logic, no issues across platforms. Now, as I mentioned, we conducted this survey at an expo, but as you can imagine, this method could be used in any context where you do intercept surveys, like conferences, retail outlets, entertainment or music events and sports. So if you're thinking of doing this yourself, one thing you have to consider is that each of these contexts will have, different considerations that you'll have to, decide about. And some of these things you might not anticipate until it's too late. So I thought it would be helpful to give you a checklist of things to consider up front, so that you don't, realize at too late a date, oh, I should have done this or thought about this. So I just have 7 considerations I'll quickly run through here. One is, it was critical for us to consider the size of the space in order to determine the number and size of posters. So for example, if you're going to be in a vast space, if you think it through, you might think, oh, I want people to be able to read the posters from a distance. So that might result in having really large posters developed. Another variable would be consider the available wall, table, or counter space where you're going to be doing the survey. And this would determine, if you're going to have posters, whether you need wall fasteners, table stands, or another option would be easels. So imagine maybe if you're doing a survey outside of a retail outlet, in the parking lot or something, or just outside the front door, you might not have wall space where you can hang a poster. You might not even have a table. It would be, helpful to have easels to put a few posters on. Consider whether it makes sense to have the survey be centralized in the space where it's being executed, or decentralized and ubiquitous. And I mentioned earlier that we created what we were thinking of as being like a survey center within the booth. And we had a table. That's where we had our table poster. That's where we had stacks of cards. We stood around the table, excuse me, and we also had, it was a place where we put the iPads down when we had some downtime and people weren't being interviewed. Now, another approach could be to make it decentralized and ubiquitous. So I'll give you an example. Imagine doing a survey at a fair. You might be in an environment that is chaotic and loud, and in order to attract attention, you want your people to be all over that venue. Then you want them to be anywhere, and if you might realize if you had a centralized location, no one would notice it anyhow. So that's just something to keep in mind. Another thing to consider in that regard would be like in the Reebok booth, we had other people to be respectful of. So we had salespeople trying to help people decide whether to buy merchandise, trying things on, checking them out, having them pay for their merchandise. So we needed to be sensitive to the fact that they had a job to do too. Point 4 here is to consider the carrying capacity of visitors to determine the size of your cards. So I mentioned we had 3-inch by 5-inch index cards. If we had been, and we knew that people were attending an expo, And as we all know, when you go to an expo, you can leave with 3 or 4 plastic bags full of stuff. So we knew people would have a place to stick the cards, so we wanted to make the cards somewhat larger. But imagine if we had been at outside of a baseball game and the people walking in, all they had was a brochure for the game. You know, we might have decided to have printed the QR code and URL on a business card size card so that they could stick it in their pocket. You know, whereas if it were larger, they might be inclined to maybe drop it or throw it away. The fifth consideration, whether your index card will be one of many collateral pieces that people will be carrying with them, and what implications that might have for the design and delivery of the card. So, you know, I mentioned at Reebok, people had plastic bags full of tchotchkes and materials they picked up in the booths. So our card was white. We might have, in hindsight, maybe we should have done it on fuchsia cardstock, something that would stand out when they open their bag to pull materials out. The last 2 points here would be consider how leisurely or rushed people might be to determine the number of cards to print. You know, when people are leisurely, they're more likely to actually engage you in doing a survey, and you're going to spend less time handing out cards, so you'll need fewer cards. If they're rushed, you're going to be handing out more cards. So what you know about the event, you know, you might be able to figure out whether you need fewer or greater number of cards. And the final consideration here is remember to find out whether the venue has any restrictions on conducting surveys. So we actually called ahead and found that initially we wanted to do our intercept surveys, just wander and roam throughout the expo area. And we found out that they had a rule that you had to stay within your booth. So I feel like that's critical. So, and the last thing is just very, very quickly, 2 slides here with things to remember. These aren't considerations, it's just things I recommend you do. Remember, budget ample time to design, print, and ship the posters and cards. Budget time to test the survey across platforms. I didn't mention this, but have some kind of space where you can store index cards, iPads, or tablets when they're not being used. With the Reebok booth, we had a storage space within the booth that we used. But if you're not going to have that, you got to find somewhere to put. You might have 2 boxes full of 3,000 cards, and you got to have somewhere to put those. The final 2 things to remember is if you're using a tablet or an iPad, you'll eventually run out of battery capacity, and you'll have to recharge. So it's a good idea to have some extras with you, maybe bring 2 per person if that's at all possible, to avoid downtime to recharge when batteries run out. And the very last point is to just a reminder to, again, check with the venue to see if there are any restrictions on doing surveys in the area. So that's it, and I can turn it back over to Dana.
Thanks, Mike. We've got some questions people have submitted. Just as a reminder to people, if you want to submit a question, submit it in the question box in the GoToWebinar interface. The first question is, how did you determine the 40% complete rate from the poster and index cards?
When people complete the surveys, they were actually coded. So when we looked at our data, we could see there was a code for those who had completed the survey. There was a code that indicated these surveys were submitted from the iPad, so we knew that those were Intercept surveys, and everything else basically we knew came in from the URL, or the smartphones. What we were not able to do is distinguish between those that came in from a smartphone versus a URL. And I know that there is a way to do that. So if anyone, and I learned this in hindsight, I didn't anticipate that I wanted to do this. So in hindsight, I wish I had done that. But there is a way to do that, and survey analytics could help you handle that. There's a way to code so that you can distinguish between the smartphone and the URL completions.
Okay. Did you see any differences in the responses based on the collection methodology?
No, we didn't. And but that's not to say that you wouldn't see that. Something we had to consider was whether whether doing the surveys across platforms might introduce any kind of bias or skewing. And given the types of questions we were asking, and we were actually conscious of this and careful, we felt that the nature of the questions, it was very factual, and we did not think that those facts would change, would vary depending upon the location where they completed the survey, the platform they used. It was just pretty straightforward. But yes, I could see that there might be cases where you would see differences, and that's something you'd have to consider. If it's people might be, their memories might skew responses if they wait 2 days to complete the survey versus people doing it in the moment, things like that.
How many interviewers did you have?
We actually only had one. so this was a small scale, and it was viewed as being experimental. So they hadn't done this before, and they wanted to try it. And that was really just using this intercept method, the initial intercept method. And then as we got into it, I said we realized we should add these other approaches, and they liked that idea. But initially, it was a very we viewed it as a small scale test. But in retrospect, if we had been permitted to roam the entire expo area, I think we would have had more people. But since we were restricted to the booth, I think it was sufficient to have one.
Did you have people abandoning the survey?
The numbers were actually very low, surprisingly, and I was actually curious. I mean, I couldn't figure this out because it wasn't coded, but I was curious to see if they, for the ones that did abandon, if they were doing it on the phone versus online. But yeah, we had a small number abandoned. It was surprisingly low. But then again, keep in mind this was because it was an internet survey, we kept it brief, right? I mean, we couldn't keep people standing there for 10 minutes. So we did keep it relatively brief. It was about 18 or 19 questions.
Okay. Any considerations that need to be given when printing QR codes to ensure respondents don't have any issues with scanning?
The only thing, what we did was we had the printer that did the cards just print a sample of, I don't know, 10, and then we tested them before we did a full print run. So I can't think of any issues you'd have other than, you just want to make sure there isn't some kind of odd glitch where the QR code is referencing the wrong survey, and that wasn't the case when we tested it. I can't imagine that would happen. But then you want to make sure in the printing that the QR code is, I guess the right size, and the ink doesn't run, things like that, so that it can cleanly scan. But we did not encounter any issues, and those are the only two things I could anticipate and recommend people think about.
Would Reebok use this method again? You mentioned they had never done this before.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would guess that they would. They like I said, this was like a one-time thing, and Reebok is actually, they saw an opportunity to do this at that expo because they were like the major, I think the exclusive footwear sponsor of the race. So it was a big, highly visible opportunity for them. But I don't get the sense that I thought this was like a unique thing that they did. I don't know if they'll do it again next year. I don't get the sense that it's not a routine thing that they do at all expos.
Okay, a couple of related questions. How many questions did you have, and what was the duration or length of the survey?
Yeah, as I mentioned, we had, it was like 18 or 19 questions. And the duration, that's actually something, yeah, we could track that in survey analytics. And as I recall, the average duration was about 5 minutes. I think that's the number we had. Yeah, it was about 5 minutes to do it. So that would be an average. I was finding I was doing them in the booth very quickly, of course, because I got to know the questionnaire and I could direct people. I was guiding people through it. So I'm guessing when people did it online or on their phone, it took a little bit longer, and the average came out to 5 minutes.
Okay. Um, Next question. How long did you collect the data and what was the total number of respondents?
I don't want to share proprietary information like that, but it was a 2-day expo before the race. So the race was on the 4th of July, and we collected that on the 2nd and 3rd. So it was 2 days, 2 full days. They were like 9-hour days. The expo was open for 9 hours each day.
Did users get a spotlight report of their answers when they completed online?
Um, that I don't think so. I don't know if that's even part of the functionality. Dana, do you?
It is possible to set it up that way, but it
Yeah,
sounds like
I, when we tested it, this was 9 months ago, but I don't think we did that at all. No.
okay. Looks like that's it. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate your time. Thanks everyone for submitting your questions. Both companies' URLs are presented here. We would certainly be happy to answer any follow-up questions you have and talk to you about the methodology. Thanks very much.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Bye bye.